Okay, this is the February 28th, 2017 Zoning Board of Appeals meeting. Come to order. The first item is the additions and deletions to agenda. Do we have any? What I'd like to do on the agenda is move the annual election of officers to item number 6 and move the appeal to item number 3. So we'll get the appeal done first.
Second.
All approve? All? Yeah, so... Okay, yeah, you're right. So we want the appeal goes to 4, and then the elections to 6.
Yep.
Okay, we have a motion then? We do have a motion. Okay, all who approve?
Aye.
Everybody approves, so motion carries. We got the appeal number 17. We got the minutes. I think we're going to do the minutes first. So we'll go to the minutes. We have a motion to approve the minutes of July.
So moved.
All who approve?
Aye.
Any negatives? Hearing none, the motion carries. Okay, so we've got the appeal number 17-001. What we're going to do for this appeal is we're going to have Brian come up and give us an overview of the appeal. Then after he gives us the overview, then we'll move to the person who is appealing and have that person give their posture on why we should approve their appeal. So, Brian?
There are a few slides this evening to try to help us navigate this case. This is a little bit of a different type of request than we're used to. While we're normally used to dealing with dimensions on setbacks, this is a case where we're actually talking about the buildability of a parcel due to nonconformity. So I wanted to make sure I had enough visual aids to help us walk through a little bit trickier scenario. So property we're dealing with tonight is located 8878 Ferry Road. The aerial photo is oriented such that north is to the right. So our subject site is a very narrow frontage off Ferry in here that then goes back several hundred feet and then expands out as sort of an L-shaped lot with the larger lot area back in here, if you can follow my cursor. So site and surroundings are all zoned R1B, conventional single-family zoning. It's basically the majority internal lots, the non-waterfront lots, the non-West River waterfront. The request that's specifically before you tonight is to allow development of a non-conforming residential parcel. Again, a little bit different type of request than we're used to. The pertinent ordinance section is 18.5, which deals with nonconforming lots, provides a number of different scenarios that are applicable when different conditions are present with certain types of nonconforming lots. For this lot in particular, what we're dealing with tonight is a nonconforming lot due to lot width. It's deficient in lot width. It's also deficient in road frontage. So there's two issues that make this nonconforming. Prior to the applicant's purchase of this property last year, this site, as well as the contiguous property, which is another L-shaped lot, however, one that has a more substantial width and frontage immediately sort of west, and then the L tucks in south, and I've got better pictures here to show you in a minute, but prior to last year's purchase of this property, those two parcels, which are contiguous, were under common ownership. I believe the assessor records refer to it as the Mahaney Trust was the ownership of those 2 parcels. Given that situation, your ordinance specifically addresses the scenario of nonconforming contiguous lots under common ownership. When we have that type of situation, the ordinance considers the parcels to be combined for development purposes. So in essence, what we have are 2 separate parcels on the tax rolls. However, for zoning purposes, they are considered one building site between the 2 of them, unless ZBA grants a variance. So the next couple of slides are a look at the layout of the site. I think this will give you a little bit better feel for what we're dealing with. So I've highlighted in this sort of pinkish shade here the subject site that we're dealing with, which has a lot number of 18A1. So the entirety of this area here was Lot 18 of Sprague subdivision as originally platted way before our time, long before any of us. That includes me, and I'm getting old. So at some point in history, Lot 18 was divided up into 4 separate parcels. You can see A1, A2, B1, and B2. B2 and B1 currently have residences on them, while A2 and A1 are both vacant at this time. We did speak, I should claim that I did it. Lori was kind enough to speak with the township assessor because we were curious as to the records of how and when this occurred. We were not able to get a specific or exact date, but we were told that it was at least more than 50 years ago. So these 4 parcels were created, again, quite a long time ago and have remained this way for many years, obviously. This did not turn out the best on my scan. This document is actually, the applicant put the majority of this together. It is in your package. I wanted you to see the subdivision layout atop the aerial photo, and I had to brighten it because it was just too dark. So I tried again to hatch in our subject site. So this is 18A1, sort of highlighted. And then if you can follow the cursor, this one here, the larger one, is 18A2. And then moving down, this other L-shaped lot is 18B1. And then the lot at the corner of the Canal and Ferry Road is 18B2. So again, just to show you the subdivision layout and the actual aerial layout, which I know they're not the same orientation, but then this is a look at the applicant's conceptual development plan. I've called it a conceptual plan at this point because what I wanted to do was make sure that we had a distinction for our discussion tonight between the actual details of the residence that's proposed as opposed to our focus, which is really whether or not a variance should be granted to allow 2 homes on these 2 sites as opposed to what is, again, one building site. So there is enough detail in here. Were the variance granted, we did work with the petitioner, and the homes that are shown on the 2 individual parcels are compliant. There would not be the need for other variances based on these designs. But again, I wanted to kind of make that clear that he's not necessarily bound by these homes should you grant the variance. The variance focus is really, again, on whether or not this second parcel should also be buildable along with the larger parcel. So hopefully that distinction is clear. If it's not, I'm happy to circle back on that. So I referenced the ordinance earlier. The specific paragraph is 18.5D1. I'm not going to read all of this, but in essence what it says is when we have 2 or more non-conforming parcels that are contiguous and have been under common ownership, for development purposes, we consider them to be one or combined in this particular case. So as I mentioned at the outset, prior to the applicant's purchase last fall, This site, along with the contiguous property, were under common ownership, and then therefore, under your ordinance, the two parcels are considered combined into one building site or one development site, if you will. So, right side of the screen, these are the standards we apply to all of our cases. 23.5B lays out the test that the board is to apply, whether or not to grant a variance. This case is no different. Again, while it is a little bit different type of request than we're used to, we still apply the same process. We still apply the same review standards. And with all that being said, you all have a copy of my review letter, but just to quickly provide a summary of that, subject parcels non-conforming due to deficient lot width, deficient road frontage. Because it's non-conforming and was previously under common ownership with the contiguous property, the ordinance considers it to be combined, for development purposes. In other words, the two parcels comprise one buildable site. As I mentioned, the assessor did look at the records, and we were not able to find a more specific date and time when these four parcels were created. However, we do know that it was more than 50 years ago. So it was obviously quite a while ago, and certainly predates our ordinances, current.
1947.
Now, how were you able to find that out and the assessor couldn't?
I have it on one of the claims. That was the revised, pardon me. The original was 1930.
Sure. The plat
Revision was 1947 after that.
The plat maps keep track of all of the revisions, so the trick with that was we weren't really sure which revision in time the division of lot 18 into those four occurred. But again, it's been
A long time.
correct. That is a very fair and accurate statement. Accordingly, applicant has requested a variance from the provisions of 18.5 D1 to allow residential development of his nonconforming parcel. In this particular instance, strict compliance does essentially prevent the applicant from building a residence. Under your ordinance, you could view that to be unnecessarily burdensome. That's under the first test for practical difficulty in your ordinance standards. Since the parcel is essentially unbuildable without a variance, in my opinion, you could view approval as fair to the owner, which is our substantial justice test. The applicant did not create the conditions that have resulted in this, the unusual lot shapes, again, that were created many, many years ago. And then just to combine a great number of the other, remember we have 14 review standards here, so to combine several of the others, in general, I really don't expect granting of the variance to have adverse impacts upon the other items in the ordinance, which would include public safety, land values, neighborhood character, light and air, et cetera, et cetera. That's all I have, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to take any questions. The petitioner is here as well, as you're aware, so any specific questions for him and or his presentation, he can follow whenever you're done with me.
Do we have any questions for Brian?
To the north is open space. Correct. Yeah, here, I'll give you a better, well, thought I'd give you, maybe my aerial on front will be a better view. So not an exact demarcation. Somewhere in here to the north is open space. Yep. Yeah, this is the adjacent parcel immediately east. This is the one with the decorative. It's got a wrought iron and brick wall kind of along its frontage. If you've driven through here, so this home obviously sits back beyond these, as proposed. You know, the development area for this site is back. Again, not necessarily bound by it, but as shown on the concept, would be even further back behind this home, and obviously protected by quite a bit of woodlands in that area.
Discussion on changing the sizes of the lots occur at a later time? Dividing them,
Well, we're not actually, these two parcels exist. We're not actually changing any lot dimensions.
but
These exist as they are separate parcels with the dimensions shown. So these already exist as is. The trick with the ordinance is that maybe let me rephrase it. They've not technically been combined. The ordinance considers them to be combined for development purposes. So that's why we have one building site on two parcels. But they've not technically been combined. So we're not splitting land. These parcels exist, and the applicant proposes to retain the exact dimensions as they exist today. So this lot highlighted, A1, that's the assessor sheet is in your submittal package, it would stay exactly the same. Legal description doesn't change. Nothing about it would change.
Yeah, that I think is a very important point.
Yeah,
that
no,
there's nothing here that's going to change. It's a question of the wording of what we have to deal with.
Right. It's the question of whether they should be allowed a second development, whether there should be
Right.
two homes on two parcels, or if we stay with the strict compliance under the ordinance, they have one building site across two separate parcels.
I was just going to say two separate parcels that are owned by two separate people, two
Currently,
separate entities.
yes.
And both parcels where the houses would be built are well large enough to take without any
Yes.
other. So it's the driveway, if you will, up to the second house that is in contention right here.
It's the ability to construct that. Well, let me maybe just go to the site plan. So, the ability to construct this as well as this. Again, there's a lot of different ways this conversation could go. So I did want to try to narrow the focus. So I do appreciate those questions because I want to make sure again that we're all clear moving forward. The one thing that I didn't hit on, because it actually just came to my attention today. I know we have some public here. My guess is they're here to talk about this. So I'll just go ahead and get into that topic now. And that's the idea of this, what's been referred to as Ferry Trail, which is this sort of dirt trail that runs through the applicant's property and connects into the open space and ultimately connects up at a road end in the neighborhood. Is it Gage? Yeah. To be completely honest with you, today about 2 o'clock was the first time I had ever heard of Ferry Trail. So I don't have the entire history of Ferry Trail. What I do know is that based on Lori talking with the township assessor, myself speaking with the township manager, the portion of Ferry Trail, and we're not going to have a great view. This is not a bad view. Again, it's super light. But yeah, you can sort of see it right in here. The portion of that trail, which obviously the public has used for many, many years, is on private property. It's never been dedicated as a public pathway, nor is there any evidence that an easement was ever granted for access across this pathway. So Lori did get some calls and some emails today with some concerns about what this potential project meant to the future of the Ferry Trail. And the truth of the matter is, at least based on our research, and unless somebody has something different, Ferry Trail is within this gentleman's property, and he has every right to essentially remove this portion of Ferry Trail with or without his variance here tonight. So I don't necessarily view the two as being tied to one another. Essentially, people have sort of walked and beaten down a trail across a private property without any technical rights that we've been able to find to do so. So continued use of that particular path or trail would be subject to the current owner's wants, quite frankly.
Not something that's before us.
That's a nice, concise way to say it, Jim.
More questions. Is there access to the open space from anywhere else? Okay. And this is taxed as one parcel, correct?
No.
No, it's
Two
taxed
separate
as
parcels.
two separate parcels.
Correct. Yeah, again, it's this idea of, in order to combine two parcels, you have to actually execute a document. You have to fill out paperwork. You have to submit it to the township assessor. He has to process it through County Register of Deeds. So to actually combine two parcels into one, there is a formal process to do so. Your ordinance does not require that people combine these parcels in this particular situation. What it does is it considers them combined. So again, they're still two separate parcels, but for our purposes under the zoning ordinance, there is one building site available out of those two separate parcels. I know I've said that, but I want to make sure that I'm being...
Question? So, on that same drawing, can you go back?
Yeah.
Discussion about the ferry trail?
Yep.
On the property. Where your arrow is showing, so the property, I guess, north, if I'm looking at it this way. So where they, oh, keep going. I want this up here, where my finger is. East. So go back towards, yeah. Is there space between this person's property and the one east?
No.
So they just run up to each other?
Correct.
It's all private property.
Here, actually, let me go. If again, we don't have the actual detail, but so that home here. This home with the really actually in great condition for probably its age. The wall along the frontage is lot 17.
Okay.
So that house is in here. The wall sits up here. The east side lot line of our subject site abuts the west side lot line of.
We have any other questions? Brian, the actual roadway, that 18-foot section going back to the property at the northern property there, is that going to be actually the driveway?
As part of this conceptual plan, yes, that is the intent. Is that what they have discussed and what is shown on what I'm going to call this conceptual plan is potentially a joint usage driveway, if the township will accept that, for access to both of these homes. What ends up happening, you can't see all of it in detail here, but if you get your plans out, you can see where some of these lines are. But it's heavily wooded across here. There's wetland and floodplain all over the place through here. And so at least, again, based on my meetings with the petitioner, with the adjacent property owner, and based on the materials in his submittal, and based on really what you see in this conceptual drawing, they're doing everything they can to stay out of these really sensitive areas, floodplains, wetlands, and really trying to retain, it's heavily wooded. And at least in discussion with the petitioner, they have stated that their intent is to keep as much of that as is possible, which ultimately will be subject to the woodlands ordinance anyway. So.
Based on my site visit, there are a great number of, I would call old growth or semi-old growth. Upper portion of both of those proposed sites, I would suggest they hire an arborist to real good look at all the large vegetation. We have a woodlands ordinance.
Correct.
That the ordinance officer hopefully will enforce. construction will be very difficult based on. I also have a concern about the shared driveway. I assume the fire marshal will have to look at this.
Absolutely, yeah. If
The width is probably adequate, but there has to be an adequate turnaround at both sites.
that will be up to the fire. I'm not going to speak for the fire marshal.
For the
so.
fire marshal?
What I would, again, if this is to move forward after tonight, we would definitely have the petitioner's engineer work with the township engineer and the fire marshal on really on the ultimate design of what's best for driveway and utilities to be run back into this area. And then additionally, probably through community development, and the township engineer would hit this too, but I would want to make sure that we have a usage and maintenance easement with responsibilities. That would go over that as well. I want to make sure that, because here's the thing is right now, it's the petitioner and his daughter and family. 10 years from now, that may not be the case. So we want to make sure there's solid documentation such that we don't end up with a he said, she said on maintenance of that driveway, whether it's plowing, whether it needs, some improvements, whether it's, well, this is my property, not yours. We want to make sure that everything is neat and tidy if, in fact, the township's going to allow that.
Sanitary sewers, all of that, the way this is drawn.
Well, and again, my hope would be that the civil that the petitioner has hired will work with Raines to identify the best course of connection for these sites. Again, regardless, I want to say that too, maybe to sort of get at what I'm trying to get at is regardless of whether the variance is granted or not, there are potential hurdles
For other things, but all those things are not before us.
Correct.
They're really not.
Whether this is one building site or two building sites, the access to utilities and road, driveway access, all of those things are going to have to be carefully looked at with the appropriate parties.
Thank you.
Does the township permit a signed private drive of some type on a road?
You do have a roads and driveways ordinance. This wouldn't technically be a private road. There may be some allowance for them to post something such that they don't, again, if this all goes through, so that they don't end up with people turning down this thinking it's a roadway. My guess is if it's, it's going to be 12 to 18 feet wide. I think they're calling out portions of it as gravel. I don't know that too many people are going to mistake it for a roadway that gets them somewhere, but we certainly could look into that. You never know.
Yeah, and this isn't going to be a road; it's a driveway.
Correct.
It's
Yeah, there's no proposal for private road requires a 60-foot
Right.
easement and has to be built to county spec. It's a much more elaborate process. Yes.
Okay, Brian, a question. Seeing that this is kind of a unique situation, do we have any other areas like this on the island?
Oh yeah.
We do. Because I know down at my end of the island, we have some long
Yes.
driveways there. But
Many of it's not, the truth of the matter is you're a waterfront community. These types of things have happened in waterfront communities going way, way, way back in time with the idea of maximizing access and or views and or frontage along the water. So, yeah, the township has a number of existing, whether you want to call them flagged lots or stacked lots, or we have driveway
Flag lot
easements getting
idea.
back to landlocked parcels. That condition exists. There was a concerted effort several years ago, essentially, to prohibit that in most instances. So the truth of the matter is we couldn't, if we went back and this was still just a solid lot 18, the township would not approve the division of lot 18 into these 4 parcels as currently shown. So our ordinances would prevent this from newly occurring. And in this specific instance, they do preclude development of two residences because of that common ownership issue. There are other circumstances where this type of situation could exist and would be allowed to be maintained, most specifically, essentially, if they're already built upon. Where there's already a residence, there's established nonconformity, and we don't take away those nonconforming rights once they're established.
The way the lots were laid out, I mean, originally, the original layer, the person who laid it out said that it would be a buildable lot. That was the original intent. I'm guessing at that, but that
Well, and
One buildable lot,
one.
the original plan, right?
no.
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 Well, let's go back. Or at some point in time, Lot 18 was Lot 18. At some point in time, Lot 18 was divided up into A1, A2, B1, B2.
Yeah, I'm not talking about that original. I'm going one step forward, saying that the way they saw it was that that would be a buildable lot.
Whenever,
now our ordinances came into effect,
Correct.
saying no, can't do it.
That's a spot-on description. That's how the nonconformity was created the moment your ordinance no longer allowed this on its own and common ownership to be developed. So.
But we do have flag lots that are built with buildings on them too.
We have stacked lots. Again, there's a concerted effort in your ordinance. Your current regulations restrict and essentially all but prohibit stacking of lots for these particular purposes, or creating flag lots with very, very narrow frontages. That's one of the reasons that you have I'll say relatively recent, it's not brand new, but you have a provision that requires a minimum road frontage. That's one of the reasons this site is non-conforming. So you can't create a new lot unless it has at least 60 feet of road frontage. So the idea being, these really narrow lots, which, sure, there's enough room to put a driveway down, but this is not the development pattern we would want to see occur today. So really, what I'm trying to get at is the distinction between this is not being newly created. This was created many years ago. We would not allow this to be created.
Do you have any other questions from the board? Hearing none, I think, Brian, are you through? Can we move on?
Mr. Chair, I can talk all night if you need me to, but I'd be happy to.
So why don't you sit down and take a rest? Now we've got the appellant here. Do we have the person who's appealing? Could you give your name and address?
Yep, Dave Rothwell, 4850 Catamount Drive, Ada, Michigan. But I've been living with my daughter down on Knutson Road. So I think.
So you are the owner of what lot?
I'm the owner of 18A1, the one that's circled in red.
18A1. Okay.
A couple of things, and just to play off of what he's already said, there are farther to the east, there are other houses that are even farther back than where we're planning on building. And farther to the east, there are shared driveways too there as well. Some with 3 houses that are sharing one driveway, and we're planning on sharing 2. And there's a lot of reasons why we're doing that, because there's a culvert that runs right underneath the 18 feet that runs back there, and that feeds all the water that comes through that eastern part of the property right into the canal. So it's very important that we don't disturb that area. So a shared driveway, in other words, would take care of that whole issue that was there. My family is here as well. It's my daughter Rochelle and Todd, and our 2 grandsons, Oliver and Simon. So the only other 2 other technical things are there's between both of us we have 120 feet, and we talked plenty with the township officials and everything whether we wanted to split and get 60 feet to each of us, and that way we wouldn't have any issue with with the road frontage and so forth and so on. And we decided just to come to you as it is and ask for the variance for the one width thing. So There's a letter that was presented by Urban Engineering, and these are their words, not my words, but they feel that this lot is already in compliance because the deed that I got from the Mahaney Trust was prior to 1995, and the width situation occurred because a new ordinance was passed in 1995. And that created the issue that we currently have, before us right now. So, but truly, I don't believe in fighting this. I want your blessing for this type of thing. I believe that the intent all along was that this is a buildable lot, and to fold this into one lot instead of having two large lots, you're just going to have one large lot. It really doesn't make any sense, to me anyway. So. You have letters from the neighbors that are there, from Doug and Fran, and also from Carol, and of course letters from my daughter and her family. So, but we love the island. We love the woods. We love the canal. Even my dog Yogi loves it. So, it's a great place. It's a beautiful gem that you guys have here. It's secure, charming, great place to raise kids. Oliver's at Park Lane Elementary, and Simon is at Building Blocks. And I've been to Park Lane 3 or 4 different times already, working with Callie Bosman and the kids, and it's just wonderful. But the most, how many times? 3 times. Thanks, Oliver. So. With all that said, the best part is the people, and I think you guys realize that. So, and every person that I've met, from my neighbors to the people at Ace Hardware or Kroger, or even the folks here at the township, Lori and Tony, and it's just been great. And so I think that 3 golf courses, 5 marinas, and own a 24-foot skeeter, and can hardly wait to get the boys out there and do some fishing. So after a while, I moved my daughter in here 2 years ago, renting a place over on Johnson, and then they started renting a place on Knutson, and she just loves it. And she said, "Dad, you're going to love this place." And I got down here, and it's true. We just fit. That's all I can tell you. It's a really wonderful place. And we're looking forward to building our houses together and living happily ever after.
So again, Mr. Rothwell, the reason you're asking us to approve the variance is why? Why are you saying that we should approve the variance? What's in your mind the main reason?
The main reason is that you have an ordinance, which I believe is something that's too restrictive, if you want to call it that, onto us, and unfair. But you have an ordinance that say I have to have a certain amount of feet width, 60 feet frontage, and I don't have that right now.
So it's an unusual circumstance that we're addressing here.
Yes. But those are my words.
Okay. Do you have anything else?
No, that's all that.
Okay.
That's all that I have.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, before we jump into public hearing, could I just make one more thing?
Yes.
So one of the things Mr. Rothwell started to allude to was we have been working with him for several months on this project. I made a reference in my letter, but I didn't speak to this verbally. That is, we did look at a host of alternatives, and I guess I wanted to make sure that the board and the public understood that as well. The initial alternative, which was referenced, was potentially a reconfiguration of these 2 parcels. However, that was going to result in the need for them to come to ZBA anyway. Ultimately, what we'd be doing is, while we'd be improving Lot 18A1, we'd actually be making Lot 18A2 non-compliant. So in order to do that, we bring in Planning Commission, Township Board for the reconfiguration, and then still need variances from the Zoning Board of Appeals. So that, again, in a semi-complicated scenario, we tried to find the least complicated request for Mr. Rothwell. So I wanted you to be aware of that. We did discuss that with him. We also discussed the potential to meet with Lot 17, which is adjacent to the east, and see if there was interest in selling off what amounts to a relatively large chunk of land at that point. They would need 62 feet of that lot to make this a compliant lot.
40.
And that's 62.
42.
Well, to get it to the 80-foot width. Now, to get fully compliant,
Okay.
you need
that's
you need
quite a
the,
chunk.
The 62, and that's 62 times how many hundred feet depth? 700, 800, 900
Yeah,
feet depth.
700,
So
yeah.
anyway, I want you to know that we did sort of try to look at what the options were to make this a conforming situation, and or to not need a variance for him to try to develop his property. And ultimately, again, that's what led to this request, is in a complicated situation, we felt complicated process.
Yeah, that was, I think you wrote a letter, and that was addressed in your letter. It was spelled out that the alternatives were looked at, so yeah, I read that, and none of the alternatives were good. I know that.
It's impossible because Carol wouldn't sell it anyway, so,
yeah,
impossible.
So you were very limited.
yes.
Right, and what we have, what we have before us is changing nothing, just a question of a variance. I mean, without having to change any lots or anything with either piece of property. We have to keep in mind, I think, the fact that these are two lots that are owned separately now, not, so you're really talking about the owner of Mr. Rothwell's ownership of the lot. What does it render him? Anything with that property without this?
If we did nothing, though, if we changed nothing, one residence can still be built there, correct?
Yes.
President?
Right.
The
Okay.
other entity, Rothwell, has a piece of property, is going to own a piece of property. Holdable.
But he knew that when he bought it.
Yes and no.
Well, buyer
yeah.
beware.
Yes and no. But
I mean, I thought about that argument, and sure, he could go back against the trust and say, you should have told me. I mean, that was really where it lies. But it's just like being able to divide this up. It's not the most practical answer to the problem.
Okay, is that, Mr. Rothwell, are you through with your,
yes, I am.
okay.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now, we got a period of public comment, so if we can have some people who want to speak toward this problem, towards the appeal, if you want to come up and give us your name and address.
Hello, my name is Roberta Urbani. My address is 29815 East River. Can you see me?
You know what? Gosh, that
What?
actually goes up and down.
This thing does? This thing does, right, yeah. I remember being here. Well,
Display control.
come rescue us. Well, anyway, you can see the top of my head.
Help is on the way.
It's easier to give her a stool.
How do I turn this on? Because I probably want to show some. So I'm here representing the Open Space Committee, and as we heard, open space is to the north of this property, and there we go. So, and just to point out, Ferry Road. So, so the reason why we're here is just it became known to us at our last open space meeting that the property had been sold, and people who use the trail were concerned about the future of the trail. And since we didn't know who owned the property, and then we happened to see that there was the zoning board meeting, so we came here so we could meet the owners. So, welcome to Grosse Ile. My husband and I are fairly new. We've only been here 8 years, which is really nothing in Grosse Ile time. So we're new like you guys. And, so probably, really the best thing would be to just have a conversation with you guys offline. But, since we're just meeting you now, I just wanted to say it's my understanding from the people who live north of Ferry, that trail is really useful for them, and whether Open Space Committee was remiss in our responsibilities when it was for sale, could we have worked out a little purchase of that or something, or can we work something out in the future? That's kind of what we're hoping for. So we're not here to say, no, we just want to say, and I've got more copies of wonderful brochure, that talks about the natural areas on Grosse Ile. And, this is a big map of all the natural areas if anybody wants to prove that. But, so we just wanted to introduce that thought into the discussion, and, and hopefully we can work something out with the property owners. So that's all I really had to say. And I think there are some people here, because I live at the south end, there are people who live at the north end and use the trail.
So, Roberta,
Yeah.
what you're interested in is the access to the green space from Ferry Road.
Right. Because it's really, apparently it's really been nice for folks to be able to go from Gage and Island Road to Ferry Road through that space, that they can get closer, they can walk to Macomb and do shopping and things like that rather than having to go all around the other spaces.
Do you know if that's heavily used?
It is, that's my understanding, and probably some of the other people can.
We use it a lot. I can tell you for my family, 5 kids and a wife, at
Right.
least 2-3 times a week minimum, all summer long, spring long. And we always see a lot of people back there. A lot of people.
Yeah,
we
'cause-
live over in Hampton.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because I walk that trail, all the way from Ferry all the way to the open space there, and it's a, you can't be an aged person and walk that because it's rough. It's a rough walk. It is a rough walk.
It's not as well. My husband and I just
There's a lot of vegetation there. You got roots on the roadway there.
Well, Grosse Ile we've got 4 maintained trails. There's Playscape and Manchester Woods and the Wildlife Sanctuary. Those are trails that are really maintained with wood chips put on, and of course, and then the refuge. But then there's all these other open space properties that are open to the public, and some of those have been used, back from Native Americans and the deer making the trails, and so people use them. You go and you see these lean-tos that kids have built. It's an amazing amenity on Grosse Ile is the natural areas, and so people are happy to use them. So we're just hoping that this development doesn't preclude that.
Okay, well, thank you.
All right, sure. Not sure how that.
You don't have to do anything.
Okay, could you give your name and address?
Good evening, John Nasajewski, 8511 Glengarry. I am north. I am the area with sidewalks. So first, as was it Brian? As Brian mentioned, I just found out, not about the ferry trail, but about this meeting, but it was at 5 o'clock. So I am not very well prepared for this. I kind of a busy guy sometimes, like all of us, and so I just found out about it, but I have known about the ferry trail since I've lived here, since I had a family. So great to see young kids, and with those sidewalks, we have lots of young kids. I don't know about the wetlands ordinance. I don't know about the tree ordinance. I know about the topography of the area because I often use it. Not around this time of year. It gets a little muddy back there. And I've actually had conversations with people on the island, one of the committees, and even some of the neighbors, because I bumped into the neighbors on both sides of the gauge side of the trail, and we've had conversations. I know the runners have on occasion thrown some like 21A gravel limestone fill down there to help shore up that trail because it is heavily used. That is really the only way for those kids, neighborhood with sidewalks, where our family's going to go to first. That's the only way for them to get through there. There's no safe way on East River. There's no quick way. They will walk the streets on Thorntree. I think that's the first one off there. That's a common one. It's a little bit safer to walk through. But to walk down Ferry Road, forget it. Straight in the ditch, no shoulder. I mean, none, because it's crumbling. County hasn't maintained it. So it's not safe. You want them to walk all the way around? I know. I tell my kids all the time they should. But you know, they don't. It's a fact of life. It is heavily used. So I'm not sure how it's all going to shake out. I know there's a lot of new families starting to move into the neighborhood again. It's great to see it. But I know they're going to be looking when they're in the middle school, when they're in the high school, to use that trail that's been used since, whenever. Since 47, whenever they started cutting up the property, as I was learning tonight, or even previous to that. And somehow we need to figure out a way to move people safely from the one part of the island to the other before somebody gets hurt walking on the side of the road. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rothwell, why don't you wait? Are there anybody? We'll wait till we get the rest of the public comment done. Is there somebody else that wants to speak? Name and address.
Ron Broush, 8525 Sherwood, north of the property. I met David on the trail, actually, the other day with Yogi. And I guess it's a beautiful location for a house. I envy you if you do get the variance. Thank you. But I guess I would encourage you to work with open space on. That is a very important artery for the kids going from the northern neighborhoods down to the middle school and high school. Both my children used it when they were in high school and the middle schools. I've used it 6 times in the last week. Encourage you to work with open space.
Thank you. We have another public comment. Name and address.
I guess my comment would be that I don't know why you'd change an ordinance to build on a lot that's currently not buildable. Other lots that are buildable. I would allow it if it's not current. My comment.
Are you through? Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Did you chase her off?
Name and address.
Hi, my name is Sean Whitaker. I live at 8815 Ferry Road, and I've been that address about 19 years, and I'm right across from Lot 17. So you can see the entrance and exit to Ferry Trail from my living room. And oh, thank you. So I can confirm what others have said, that trail is very heavily used year-round. I can see people walking in there all times of day, even at night, coming out of there. So that's one thing to consider. The other thing, I have a question for Brian. Lot 16, about 12 years ago, we had a request to do a subdivide and put 2 houses, kind of a stacked home scenario, and that was I don't think that was approved because there's nothing built there. So I was wondering that the township didn't approve that at that time, so I'm wondering what makes this situation different.
If I may, Mr. Chair, my memory, I'm not going to be able to give you direct quotes
Right.
about a project from 12 years ago.
Right.
The truth of the matter is what you've just described was the creation of a new situation. So that would have been creating something that's no longer permitted.
But it was the same discussion, shared driveway, stacked homes, and that was something that was deemed unfavorable.
But creating that out of compliant parcels. The distinction here that I tried to make earlier is we're not changing the configuration of these parcels.
Right.
They currently exist as is, and they will not be altered to accommodate the request.
Seems like a fine line.
Ordinances are often dependent on being technical, so.
Okay, that was my point, because that was denied 12 years ago, so I was wondering what, okay.
I can't give you any specifics on that particular project or request.
Okay, all right. That's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you. We have any other public comment? Okay, Mr. Rothwell, you want to come up and make your comment?
Oh, Paul?
John Paul.
Oh, sorry, John Paul. So anyway, I met John Paul a couple of times through there. He even offered to come over and help me with my land and to do things and everything else, which just shows you the spirit and heart of the people. So there is a real danger to this trail too. So, and I was at Lloyd's and having some dinner, and George, and I think it's George and Mary, their son went over the handlebars and almost broke his sternum on the thing. So there's bikes that run right up and down there. It's heavily muddy, and there's a lot of roots that go all the way through those things, and in a big incline in certain areas too. So I'm just saying that I have no issue discussing anything with open space later on and deciding, what to do. Time John Paul wants to walk through there, he's more than welcome, quite frankly.
So you're basically what you're saying is that the pathway itself is not exactly ideal for traffic. I walked it myself, and as I indicated a couple minutes ago, that it's not like walking on a pavement. Period.
No.
That isn't the case. So there is.
The biggest danger, I believe, is in the bicycle traffic. There's no question in regards.
Okay, let me ask another question, because the people were asking about working with like the open space people and that. Are you amenable to that?
Yeah, I'll have discussions about anything. So obviously, it's a privacy situation.
Yeah, you own the property.
I bought the property for privacy. But if somebody wants to come, to me and say, hey, I'd like to have access, through that area, I'm more than welcome to,
Yeah,
to
because you got a liability situation there that's quite heavy. I mean, it's not. If I were a property owner, I'd be looking at that.
I already have insurance that I'm paying for right now in regards to the thing, because anytime you have any man-built item, which they would consider, right, that culvert to be man-built, and I have a liability issue. So I have insurance right now to protect myself against that. So, but that goes without saying. I mean, you don't want anybody coming on your property that's not invited. But if to discuss the thing and work something out, I don't have a problem. I mean, if John Paul, sorry, John, I thought your name was John, but if John Paul comes to me and says, I want to continue to walk through, I have no problem with that.
Well, it's not going to.
I can tell you, it'll be on a case by. You can't open up to because you don't have any idea.
It's private property. It's private property, and the owner of that property controls it. Despite what has taken place prior, it's now you have a new owner, and if he wants to fence it off, he can. There's no, it's up to him. The point being, it's a separate issue, has no bearing on what we're doing here.
No matter if I get the variance or not, that issue still exists.
That's absolutely right.
No matter what happens, the other lot, my daughter's going to be building her home. okay? And that'll be a construction site, and we will have to close it off at that point from everybody. But again, if John Paul comes to me and he says, okay, I'll walk on right over here and only stay over and won't come, then yeah, I trust the
It
gentleman.
could just as easily go to whoever owns lot 17 and say, can we
Same
go
thing.
over there?
Yes.
Okay, well, I think we understand.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from the public? Do you have any comments from the board? If not, then I'll entertain a motion. Can we have a motion?
I'd make a motion that Appeal 17-001 be approved. And I'll just give my thought is not disturbing the lots as they are buildable for buildable purposes. It's because of the wording of our ordinance is why they're not buildable. It's not that they're not buildable. It's simply the wording of the ordinance, which came into effect long after these lots were put this way. My thought is where these homes are going to be, they're not going to disturb anyone. They can be built on the lots as they are without having to reconfigure anything. And we have, again, two separate owners. You would by not doing so, you're rendering one lot unusable. And quite truthfully, he can't build on it. Who's he going to sell it to build it? Making the lot worthless. But that's my thought on it.
If this single combined driveway, if this relationship goes sour, and 18A1 and 18A2, since they are different, if 18A2 wants their own driveway, they would have to build another one in that space. Am I
correct? They have the
Other one.
Yeah,
correct.
They can do
Doesn't
that.
have to be in that space.
Right, on their property. They'd have to build another one on their property. Yes, and they have the space to do it.
We got a second. Do we have any discussions? Hearing no discussions, we can get a vote here. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? We have the favors. All in favor is the majority, so the appeal was approved. Thank you. Give it to Lori. Thanks, Brian. Did a good job.
That was.
Okay, we got another item on the agenda, which is always like pulling teeth, and that's the getting our officers, the election of the officers. So, do we have a motion for chairperson?
I'd like to move that having Jim as chair again.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carries. Now we've got the chairperson, the vice chairperson. You have a motion?
Second?
Discussion, hearing no discussion, all in favor? Aye. Motion carries. We got Gary as vice chairperson, now secretary. We have a motion on the secretary.
Second.
Did you feel peer pressure?
Okay, we've got the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. So we have Mr. Secretary, and that is our duty, right, Lori? We got this. We got this
Yes.
done.
Yeah, usually we need this for our annual meeting. And usually we're running around. I think we even had a special meeting last time to get it done. So I thought I'd bring it up early as possible this time.
So we did it, right?
Yeah, we did it. Thank you.
All right. Comments, and we have any comments, miscellaneous? I do want to offer our condolences to Jackie, where her mother died. So accept our condolences. It's a tough period. Safe. We want you to come back.
Yes. Lori, do we have anything that looks like we got anything coming down the road? Or do we take our 6 months off now? And
Go to Florida.
Yeah.
I do like your comments at the board meeting that come out to the ZBA meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
Lori.
try and
So,
drum up
I mean,
business.
how is the buildings going on the island? Are we seeing an increase in buildings, or? But nothing that's come before the board. You guys are doing a good job directing these people, right?
Or not looking.
Doing your job. Okay, can we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you.
Increase from Detroit, and we're going to